The snow came down like judgment that December morning in 1884, and Daisy Greene stumbled through it with nothing but determination keeping her upright, and a baby goat tucked inside her woolen coat. Her fingers had gone numb an hour ago, maybe two. She'd lost track of time when the blizzard turned the world into a swirling white nightmare that swallowed the mountain pass whole. The goat bleated weakly against her chest, its small body trembling, and she whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep as the wind tried to tear her off her feet. Through the curtain of snow, a shape emerged, solid and dark against the pale fury of the storm, a barn, and beyond it the outline of a ranch house with smoke rising from its chimney. She'd made it. Somehow, impossibly, she'd made it. Daisy's legs gave out on the third step toward salvation. She went down hard on her knees in the snow, catching herself on one hand while the other clutched the goat through her coat. The cold burned through her skirts, soaked clear through from hours of walking. She tried to stand, but her body wouldn't obey any more. The warmth had left her completely now, replaced by a dangerous heaviness that made her limbs feel like they belonged to someone else. The barn door opened, and a man stepped out into the storm. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a heavy sheepskin coat with his hat pulled low against the wind. For a moment he just stood there, staring at the woman collapsed in his yard. Then he was moving, his long strides eating up the distance between them. "What in the name of?" He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands already reaching to help her up. His eyes, she noticed through her gathering fog, were a striking gray-blue like storm clouds over the mountains. "Madam, can you stand?" The goat, Daisy managed through chattering teeth. "Please, the goat." He looked at her like she'd lost her mind, which perhaps she had. But then the baby goat chose that moment to bleat loudly from inside her coat, and understanding dawned on his weathered face. He was handsome in a rugged way, she thought distantly, probably in his mid-20s, with dark stubble covering his jaw and lines around his eyes from squinting into too many sunrises. "Can you walk if I help you?" His voice was deep, rough from the cold. "I think so." He got an arm around her waist and pulled her up, taking most of her weight as they struggled through the snow toward the barn. The wind howled around them, trying to push them back, but the cowboy was solid as an oak and just as immovable. They made it to the barn door, and he shoved it open with his shoulder, pulling them both inside out of the killing wind. The relative warmth of the barn hit Daisy like a wall, and she swayed, would have fallen if not for the man's steady grip. The scent of hay and horses and animal warmth filled her nose. A few horses nickered from their stalls, curious about the intrusion. "There's room in the barn," the cowboy said, more to himself than to her, already looking around at his options. "But you need to get to the house, get warm." "That goat too?" "Can't," Daisy said through lips that felt frozen. "Can't bring a goat into your house. You can barely stand and you're worried about barn etiquette." He shook his head, but there was something almost like amusement in his eyes. "I'm Zachary Anderson. This is my ranch. And right now I'm more concerned about keeping you both alive than where a goat sleeps. Daisy Greene." She fumbled with the buttons of her coat, trying to free the small goat. Her fingers wouldn't work properly. "She needs warmth, needs to eat." Zachary's hands, large and work-roughened but surprisingly gentle, helped her with the buttons. The baby goat tumbled out into his arms, a tiny brown and white creature that couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. It bleated pitifully, and he tucked it against his chest with practiced ease. "She's half frozen, you both are." He looked at Daisy with something between exasperation and concern. "How long have you been walking in this storm?" "Since dawn, maybe before I lost track. It's past noon now," he swore under his breath. "Come on. I'll get you both sorted in the barn first. Then we're getting you to the house before you lose any fingers to frostbite." He led her to an empty stall that was mercifully free of drafts, where clean hay was piled thick on the ground. From a shelf he pulled down blankets, the kind used for horses but clean and dry. He set the goat down gently, and it immediately burrowed into the hay, shivering. "Need to get her warm from the inside, too," Zachary muttered. He disappeared for a moment and came back with a bottle and what looked like goat's milk. "Got a nanny goat that kidded last month. This should work." Daisy watched as he coaxed the baby goat to drink, his big hands patient and sure. The little creature latched onto the bottle and drank greedily, its tail starting to wag with renewed energy. "You're good at that," Daisy said, her own voice sounding strange and distant to her ears. "Raised enough orphaned animals in my time." He glanced up at her and his expression shifted to alarm. "You're white as a sheet. Sit down before you fall down." She wanted to argue, but her legs were already folding. She sank into the hay and Zachary was there immediately, wrapping one of the horse blankets around her shoulders. The shivers started then, violent tremors that shook her whole body. "That's actually good," he said, keeping one hand on the goat's bottle while watching Daisy with worried eyes. "Means your body's trying to warm itself up, but we need to get you inside soon. Why were you out in this storm?" "Where were you headed?" "Seattle," Daisy managed between shivers, "was trying to reach Seattle." "Seattle's 40 miles north of here. You're on the southern edge of the territory near the foothills." He shook his head. "You got turned around bad. Were you alone?" "Stage broke an axle yesterday. Driver said we'd have to wait for rescue, but I couldn't. Had to keep moving." The words came out in fragments. "The goat, she was at the way station. Owner said he was going to butcher her, said she was too small, wouldn't ever be good for milk or breeding. I couldn't let him." Something shifted in Zachary's expression as he looked at her, really looked at her. "So you walked into a blizzard to save a goat. Seemed like the right thing to do at the time." Daisy tried to smile, but her face felt frozen. The baby goat finished the bottle and curled up in the hay, already looking better. The shivers that had racked its small body were subsiding, and it made soft, contented sounds as it nestled into the warmth. "She'll be all right here for a bit," Zachary said, standing and offering Daisy his hand. "But you won't be if we don't get you warmed up properly. Can you walk?" "I think so." He pulled her to her feet and kept his arm around her as they left the barn. The wind hit them like a fist the moment they stepped outside, stealing Daisy's breath. It was only 50 yards to the house, but it felt like 50 miles. Snow stung her face, and the cold seemed to seep into her bones despite the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Zachary kept her moving, his body a windbreak that took the worst of the storm's fury. The house was solid timber, well built against the harsh mountain winters. Zachary got the door open and pulled her inside, slamming it shut behind them against the wind. The warmth inside was almost painful against Daisy's frozen skin. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace that dominated one wall of the main room. The space was neat but sparse, the home of a man who lived alone and had little use for decoration. "Sit here, close to the fire." Zachary guided her to a chair near the hearth. "Not too close, though. You need to warm up gradual. I'll get some hot coffee going." Daisy sank into the chair, her body trembling with cold and exhaustion. She watched as Zachary moved around the kitchen area with efficient, practiced movements. He was probably 5 or 6 years older than her 22 years, she guessed, with the kind of weathered look that came from years of hard outdoor work. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and when he took off his coat she could see the powerful build of a man who made his living with his hands. "Here." He pressed a tin cup of hot coffee into her hands. "Drink it slow. Let it warm you up from inside." The heat of the cup against her palms was almost painful, but she held on, bringing it to her lips and sipping carefully. The coffee was strong and bitter and absolutely perfect. She could feel its warmth spreading through her chest. Zachary crouched down in front of her, his gray-blue eyes serious. "I need to check your hands and feet. Frostbite can set in quick in weather like this. I can feel them. They hurt." "That's good. Pain means the nerves are still working." Gently, he took one of her hands, the one not holding the coffee. Her fingers were red and swollen, but as he carefully examined each one, flexing them gently, he nodded. "I think you got lucky. Might lose some skin as they heal, but I don't see any blackening. What about your feet? Can you feel your toes?" "Yes, they hurt too. Let me check anyway." He knelt and started unlacing her boots, his movements careful and impersonal. When he pulled off her boots and stockings, Daisy's feet were an alarming shade of purple-red, but again Zachary nodded with what looked like relief. "You'll be all right. Probably be painful for a few days as the circulation comes back proper, but I don't think there's permanent damage." He fetched a basin of cool water and set her feet in it. At her confused look, he explained, "Cold water first, then we'll gradually warm it up. If I put your feet in hot water right off, it could do more harm than good. You've done this before. Spent a winter snowed in up in the high country when I was younger, made some mistakes and learned from them." He pulled up another chair and sat across from her. "Now, you want to tell me the whole story. Why a woman's traveling alone through Washington Territory in December with nothing but a baby goat for company." Daisy took another sip of coffee, feeling strength starting to seep back into her body. "I was in Portland, working as a seamstress. The man I was supposed to marry, he decided he preferred my savings to my company. Took every cent I had and disappeared." The words came easier than she'd expected. Maybe it was the warmth, or the coffee, or the way Zachary listened without judgment in his eyes. "I had nothing left. No money, no prospects. My cousin in Seattle wrote that there was work there, that I could stay with her family until I got back on my feet. I used the last of what I could scrape together for stage fare. And the goat," a smile tugged at Daisy's lips despite everything. "Like I said, the stage broke down at a way station. The man who ran it, he was cruel. Had this baby goat he was going to kill just because she was small. I couldn't stand it. I told him I'd take her. He laughed at me, but he let me have her. Then the blizzard hit. The driver said it was suicide to keep going, that we should wait it out. But I'd heard him talking to the station master. Said it might be days before help came, maybe a week. I didn't have a week's worth of patience or pride left in me. I thought if I headed north, I'd hit Seattle eventually." She laughed, a bitter sound. "I didn't even head the right direction. Mountain storms can turn you around quick if you don't know the land." Zachary poured hot water from the kettle into the basin at her feet, mixing it with the cold. "You're lucky you found this place. There's nothing else for miles in any direction. I know. I thought I was going to die out there. You almost did." His voice was gentle but serious. "Another hour in that cold and we wouldn't be having this conversation." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. Daisy studied Zachary's face in the firelight, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes reflected the flames. He had saved her life without hesitation, had taken in both her and her goat without question. She didn't even know this man, but she owed him everything. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for taking us in, for saving us." Zachary met her eyes and something passed between them, a spark of recognition that made Daisy's breath catch. "There's room in the barn for a goat," he said with a slight smile, "and room in the house for a woman who'd walk through a blizzard to save something small and helpless. I reckon that says something about a person's character." Heat that had nothing to do with the fire rose in Daisy's cheeks. She looked down at her coffee cup, suddenly shy. I didn't think about it much. Just seemed wrong to let her die. Most people wouldn't have thought about it at all. He stood and checked the water temperature at her feet, then added more hot water. How's that feel? Better. Still hurts, but better. The hurt will fade in a day or two. He moved to the kitchen and started pulling out ingredients. You need food. When's the last time you ate? Yesterday morning. He muttered something under his breath that might have been another curse. No wonder you could barely stand. I'll make some stew. Nothing fancy, but it'll warm you up and fill your belly. Daisy watched him work. The easy competence of his movements as he chopped vegetables and meat, added them to a pot hanging over the fire. The domesticity of it was strange, sitting in this unknown man's house while a blizzard raged outside, but there was also something comforting about it. Something that felt almost right. How long have you lived here? She asked. 5 years. Built this place myself, piece by piece. There was quiet pride in his voice. Got about 200 acres, run cattle mostly, some horses. It's not a big operation, but it's mine. No family, not anymore. Parents died when I was 19. Fever took them both within a week of each other. Had a brother, but he headed east, wanted city life. Haven't heard from him in 3 years. Zachary stirred the pot, not looking at her. It's just me out here. Doesn't it get lonely? He glanced at her then, something unreadable in his eyes. Sometimes, but I like the quiet, like being my own man, not answering to anyone. He paused. Though I suppose the company's not unwelcome when it shows up half frozen on my doorstep. Daisy felt that warmth in her cheeks again. There was something about the way he looked at her, direct and honest, that made her heart beat a little faster. She told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural response to being rescued, but there was more to it than that, and she knew it. The stew began to bubble and the smell filled the small house, rich and savory. Daisy's stomach growled loudly and Zachary laughed, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his serious face. Won't be long now, he promised. He pulled out a loaf of bread and cut thick slices. This storm's likely to last through the night at least, maybe into tomorrow. You'll need to stay here until it clears. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. Truth is, it'll be nice to have someone to talk to besides the horses. He ladled stew into 2 bowls and brought them to the small table near the fire. Come on, you can eat at the table. Your feet should be all right for a bit out of the water. Daisy stood carefully, testing her weight. Her feet tingled and ached, but they held her. She made her way to the table and sat across from Zachary. The first spoonful of stew was heaven, hot and filling and exactly what her body needed. This is wonderful, she said between bites. It's just stew. It's the best stew I've ever had. And in that moment it was true. They ate in companionable silence for a while. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the world, but inside was warm and safe. Daisy found herself stealing glances at Zachary, watching the way the firelight played across his features, the strength in his hands as he tore his bread. There was something solid about him, something dependable that drew her in. What will you do? Zachary asked eventually. After the storm clears, will you still try for Seattle? Daisy considered the question. Her cousin's offer was still there, the promise of work and a place to stay. But sitting in this warm house with this quiet, kind man, Seattle seemed very far away and not nearly as appealing as it had that morning. I suppose I should, she said slowly. My cousin's expecting me, and I need work, need to start over somewhere. There's work here too. In the territory, I mean. Zachary's voice was casual, but his eyes were intent on hers. Seattle's growing fast, but there's plenty of opportunity in the smaller settlements too. Place called Tacoma, about 30 miles northwest of here, is building up. Lots of logging, lots of people moving in. You think I should consider staying closer? I think you should consider whatever makes sense for you." He paused, then added quietly, "But I also think if you headed to Seattle right off, I'd regret not asking you to stay." The air between them suddenly felt charged, heavy with possibility. Daisy's heart hammered in her chest. She barely knew this man, had been under his roof for less than a few hours, but something about him called to her in a way she'd never experienced before. "I don't even know you," she said, but her voice was soft, not a rejection. "No, you don't. And I don't know you, but I'd like to." Zachary reached across the table and his fingers brushed hers, tentative, questioning. "I know it's sudden. I know it probably sounds crazy. But when I saw you out there in the snow, when I pulled you inside and saw the fire in your eyes even half frozen, something in me recognized something in you." Daisy didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she turned it over, letting her fingers intertwine with his. His palm was calloused and warm, and his touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "I felt it too," she admitted. "When you helped me. The way you were gentle with the goat, the way you took care of me without making me feel like a burden. I don't know what it means, but I felt it." "Then stay," Zachary said simply. "At least for a few days after the storm clears. Let me show you the ranch, the area. Let us figure out if this feeling is real or just two lonely people finding comfort in a storm." It was madness. Daisy knew it was madness. She was running from a man who'd betrayed her, had lost everything, was in no position to trust her instincts about anyone. But looking into Zachary's steady gray-blue eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand around hers, she found herself nodding. "A few days," she agreed. "Then we'll see." The smile that spread across Zachary's face was like sunrise, transforming him from handsome to heartbreakingly beautiful. "A few days," he echoed. "That's all I'm asking." They finished their meal and Zachary showed Daisy to a small bedroom off the main room. It was simple but clean, with a bed covered in thick quilts and a window that looked out onto the white fury of the storm. "I'll sleep out by the fire," Zachary said. "Give you privacy. There's a pitcher and basin for washing, and I'll bring in some warm water. If you need anything in the night, just call out. What about the goat? I'll check on her before I bed down, make sure she's warm and fed." He paused in the doorway, his frame filling it. "Daisy, I'm glad you showed up on my doorstep today. Even if nothing comes of these few days, I'm glad you're safe." "So am I," she whispered. After he left, Daisy sank onto the bed, her body finally releasing the tension it had been carrying all day. She was warm, she was fed, she was safe. And she was in the home of a man who made her heart race and her stomach flutter with a single look. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She lay back on the bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin, and listened to Zachary moving around in the other room, the sound of him banking the fire, pulling out bedding for himself. The storm howled outside, but she felt cocooned, protected. Her last thought before sleep took her was of gray-blue eyes and work-roughened hands and the promise of a few days to see what might be possible. Morning came gray and cold, but the storm had lessened. Daisy woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was, then memory flooded back. She sat up, her body aching and stiff from the previous day's ordeal. Her hands and feet throbbed dully, but the pain was manageable. She found her stockings and boots by the door where Zachary must have left them, cleaned and dried. She dressed quickly and emerged from the bedroom to find Zachary at the stove, cooking breakfast. He'd already been outside, she could tell, his hair damp with melted snow and his cheeks ruddy from the cold. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder with a smile that made her stomach flip. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in months." Daisy moved to the table. "How's the goat?" bright-eyed and hungry. Fed her about an hour ago. She's doing just fine. He brought plates to the table, piled with eggs and bacon and fried potatoes. Storm's dying down, but the snow's deep. We're probably snowed in for at least today, maybe tomorrow too. I'm sorry to be such an imposition. Daisy. He sat across from her, his expression serious. You're not an imposition. Stop thinking of yourself that way. He paused, then added with a slight smile, besides, I'm enjoying the company more than you know. They ate breakfast and Zachary told her about the ranch, about the hard work of building it from nothing, the long winters and the satisfaction of watching something grow from his own sweat and determination. Daisy found herself fascinated, not just by the stories, but by the man telling them. There was a quiet strength to Zachary, a certainty about who he was and what he wanted from life that she found incredibly attractive. After breakfast, Zachary bundled up and went out to tend to the animals. Daisy insisted on coming with him, wrapping herself in a spare coat of his that hung huge on her frame. The snow was indeed deep, drifted in places up to Daisy's waist. Zachary had to break trail to the barn, his powerful legs pushing through the white expanse. Inside the barn, the baby goat greeted them with enthusiastic bleating. She was definitely doing better, her eyes bright and her movements energetic. Daisy scooped her up, and the little creature nuzzled into her neck, making happy sounds. She's bonded to you, Zachary observed, watching them with soft eyes. Going to be hard to leave her if you decide to move on. I know. Daisy stroked the goat's soft fur. I hadn't really thought past saving her, didn't have much of a plan for what came next. Story of life sometimes. We do what feels right in the moment and figure out the rest as we go. Zachary moved to tend to his horses, checking their water and feed. He had 4 horses in all, sturdy working animals built for the harsh terrain. I do that with the ranch sometimes. Make decisions based on instinct and see where they lead. Has it worked out for you, so far? He looked at her over a horse's back. Brought you here, didn't it? The weight of his gaze made Daisy's breath catch. She busied herself with the goat, trying to calm her suddenly racing heart. This feeling, this pull toward Zachary, it was getting stronger instead of fading. Every moment in his presence made her more aware of him, more drawn to the quiet competence and gentle strength he embodied. They spent the morning working together in the barn, Zachary showing Daisy how he managed things, asking her opinion on small decisions as though her input mattered. It was a novel feeling for Daisy, being treated as an equal partner rather than someone to be directed or dismissed. Her former fiancé had never asked her opinion on anything, had made it clear that her thoughts on subjects beyond sewing and housekeeping were neither wanted nor valued. Around midday, they trudged back through the snow to the house. Daisy helped prepare a simple lunch of bread and cheese and leftover stew. They ate at the table, talking easily now, the initial awkwardness of strangers gone. Tell me about Portland, Zachary said. What was it like living in a city, crowded, noisy? Sometimes exciting, but mostly just exhausting. Daisy considered her words carefully. I thought I wanted it, the shops and the people and the sense that things were always happening. But looking back, I think I was just trying to want what I thought I should want. What society said a proper young woman should aspire to. And what do you actually want? No one had ever asked her that before. Daisy stared at Zachary, seeing genuine curiosity in his eyes, real interest in her answer. I want to matter, she said slowly. I want to do work that means something with people who value me. I want a life that's mine, not something I'm living because it's expected. She paused, then added quietly, I want to be somewhere I belong. Do you think you could belong here? In the territory, I mean, in this kind of life? Daisy looked around the simple house, thought about the barn and the animals and the vast white landscape outside. Thought about the silence broken only by wind and the crackle of fire, the hard work and the satisfaction of it. Thought about the man sitting across from her, watching her with those storm cloud eyes. "I think I could," she said. "I think maybe I already do." Zachary's hand found hers across the table, his fingers warm and sure. "I'm falling for you, Daisy Greene. I know it's too soon. I know I barely know you, but I need you to know that. Need you to understand that when I ask you to stay, it's not just about having company or help around the ranch. It's about you. About the way you make me feel when you smile, the way my heart jumped when you walked out of that bedroom this morning, the way I can't stop thinking about what it might be like to have you here always." Daisy's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears, overwhelmed tears. "I'm scared," she admitted. "The last man I trusted destroyed me, took everything I had and left me with nothing. I'm not him." Zachary's voice was firm, his grip on her hand steady. "I won't make promises I can't keep, and I won't take anything you don't freely give. All I'm asking is for a chance. A real chance, not just a few days, but real time to see if this could be something lasting. What if I'm not strong enough for this life? What if I can't handle the isolation or the work or the winters? What if you're stronger than you know?" Zachary countered. "You walked through a blizzard to save a goat. You survived betrayal and loss and kept going. That's not weakness, Daisy. That's strength I'd be proud to have beside me." Daisy stood, her chair scraping back, and Zachary rose too, uncertainty flickering across his features. But she didn't pull away. Instead, she stepped around the table and stood before him, looking up into his face. He was so much taller than her, broad and solid and real. "I'm falling for you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I am. The way you took me in, the way you care for the animals, the way you listen when I talk like my words actually matter. I've never felt this before, this certainty that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Zachary raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull back, and cupped her cheek. His palm was warm and calloused and gentle. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes." He lowered his head and his lips met hers, soft at first, questioning, then with more confidence as Daisy responded. Her hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart under her palms. The kiss deepened, and Daisy felt like she was falling, tumbling into something vast and unknown and wonderful. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he murmured. "Not just for a few days. Stay and let me court you proper. Let me show you what life could be like here. And if after a few months you decide it's not for you, I'll take you to Seattle myself and wish you well. But please, Daisy, give us a real chance. A few months. However long you need to be sure. A month, 6 months, a year. I'll wait however long it takes." Daisy pulled back enough to see his face, to read the sincerity in his eyes. This was real. He was real. And the feeling between them, as sudden and unexpected as it was, felt more genuine than anything she'd experienced in her entire relationship with her former fiancé. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll stay. I'll give us a chance." The smile that broke across Zachary's face was radiant. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around in the small kitchen, and Daisy laughed, a sound of pure joy that she barely recognized as coming from herself. When he set her down, he kissed her again, deeper this time, full of promise and hope and the beginning of something neither of them could quite name yet, but both recognized as precious. The storm cleared the next day, leaving the world transformed into a pristine white wilderness. Zachary spent the morning digging out paths from the house to the barn and the other outbuildings. Daisy helped where she could, though her smaller size made the heavy work difficult. but she insisted on doing her part, on proving she could handle the demands of ranch life. In the afternoon, Zachary hitched up a horse to a small sledge, and they made the trip into the nearest settlement, a tiny cluster of buildings about 8 miles north called Willow Creek. The journey took over 2 hours through the deep snow, but Daisy didn't mind. Sitting beside Zachary on the sledge, wrapped in blankets with the winter sun bright overhead, felt like an adventure. Willow Creek consisted of a general store, a small church, a blacksmith, and a handful of houses. The proprietor of the general store, a weathered woman named Martha who looked to be in her 50s, raised her eyebrows when Zachary walked in with Daisy. "Well now, Zach Anderson, who's this pretty thing you've brought to town?" "This is Daisy Greene," Zachary said, his hand resting protectively on the small of Daisy's back. "She got caught in the storm a few days back, ended up at my place. Daisy, this is Martha Collins. She knows everything that happens in these parts." "Pleasure," Daisy said, offering her hand. Martha shook it firmly, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. "Caught in the storm, hum? Lucky thing you found Zach's place. Not much else out that way." She looked between them, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "And I'm guessing she's planning to stay a while." "If things work out the way I hope," Zachary said, not bothering to hide his feelings. "We're courting, taking it proper and slow, but courting all the same." "About time you found someone," Martha said with approval. "Man shouldn't live alone like you do, Zach. Not healthy." To Daisy she added, "He's a good one, this fellow. Honest and hard-working. You could do a lot worse." "I'm beginning to realize that," Daisy said with a smile. They purchased supplies, including fabric, so Daisy could make herself some proper work clothes suited to ranch life. Martha threw in some extra thread and a packet of needles with a wink. "Welcome to the territory, dear. We're glad to have you." On the journey back, Daisy found herself thinking about what Martha had said about Zachary being a good man. Everything she'd seen confirmed it. He was patient and kind, strong but never harsh, confident without being arrogant. In the few days she'd known him, he'd shown her more respect and genuine care than her former fiancé had in their entire courtship. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked, glancing at her with that slight smile she was coming to love. "About how strange life is. A week ago I thought my life was over. Now I'm sitting in a sledge in the Washington Territory with a man I barely know, heading back to a ranch that's starting to feel like home." "Is that a good strange or a bad strange?" "Good. Definitely good." She leaned against his shoulder and felt his arm come around her, holding her close. "Zachary, what happens when spring comes? When the snows melt and I could leave if I wanted to? That's up to you. I meant what I said, Daisy. I'll court you proper, show you what life here is really like. When spring comes, if you want to go, I'll help you go, but I'm hoping by then you won't want to. And if I stay, what then?" He was quiet for a moment, the only sound the crunch of the sledge runners on snow and the jingle of the horse's harness. "Then I'll ask you to marry me. If you'll have me, build a life together, a real life. Fill that house with more than just the two of us eventually if you want children. Grow the ranch, make something that's ours together." "That sounds nice," Daisy said softly. "That sounds really nice." The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Daisy threw herself into learning everything about ranch life. She helped Zachary with the animals, learning to milk the nanny goat and care for the horses. She took over the cooking and sewing, mending Zachary's worn clothes and making curtains for the windows that brightened the whole house. The baby goat, whom Daisy had named Clover, grew stronger and more mischievous by the day. She followed Daisy everywhere, bleating when she was out of sight, sleeping curled up by the fire in the evenings. Zachary built her a small pen in the barn, but often as not, Clover ended up in the house, and neither Daisy nor Zachary had the heart to strictly enforce the barn-only rule. They talked for hours in the evenings, learning each other's histories and dreams. Zachary told her about growing up in Oregon, about his parents' small farm, and how he'd always dreamed of having land of his own. Daisy shared her childhood in rural Idaho, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a shopkeeper. Her love of reading and her skill with a needle that had seemed like her only marketable talent. "You're more than your skills," Zachary told her one night as they sat by the fire, Clover snoring softly at their feet. "You're smart and brave and kind. Those things matter more than whether you can sew a straight seam." "My mother always said a woman's worth was in what she could do with her hands," Daisy said quietly. "Make a good stitch, cook a good meal, keep a clean house. That's what made you valuable. Your mother was wrong." Zachary took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You're valuable because you're you. Because you laugh at my bad jokes and aren't afraid to tell me when I'm being stubborn. Because you walked into a blizzard for a goat and you cried when one of the barn cats had kittens last week. That's what makes you valuable, Daisy. Not what you can do, but who you are." Daisy blinked back tears. She'd never heard words like that before, never been valued for anything beyond her utility. "How do you do that?" she whispered. "Do what?" "Say exactly what I need to hear, see me in a way no one else ever has." "Maybe because I'm seeing you with clear eyes and a heart that's already half gone for you." He pulled her closer, his arm around her shoulders. "Maybe because when I look at you, I see my future and it's the best thing I can imagine." They kissed then, slow and sweet, and Daisy felt herself falling deeper. It was terrifying and wonderful, this tumbling into love. Every day brought new revelations, new reasons to care for this quiet, steady man who'd saved her life and was now saving her heart. January gave way to February, and the worst of the winter weather began to ease. The snows still came, but less frequently, and there were days when the sun shone bright and almost warm. Zachary took Daisy on rides around the property, showing her the boundaries of his land, the frozen creek that would run strong in spring, the stands of timber, and the meadows where the cattle would graze once the grass returned. "I want to expand," he told her one afternoon as they sat on horseback overlooking a valley. "Buy more cattle, maybe some sheep. Build a bigger barn. There's potential here, Daisy. We could build something really good." Though we made her heart skip. He'd been doing that more and more, speaking of the future in plural terms, assuming her presence in his plans. She should have been frightened by it, should have balked at the presumption. Instead, it filled her with warmth. "What about a garden?" she asked. "Could we put in a big garden come spring? Grow vegetables, maybe some flowers, anything you want." Zachary's eyes were soft as he looked at her. "This place is as much yours now as it is mine, Daisy. You've put your mark on it already. Made it a home instead of just a house I sleep in between work." "I love it here," Daisy admitted. "I didn't think I would. Thought I'd miss the city, miss civilization, but I don't. I love the quiet and the space and the work. I love knowing that what I do matters, that I'm building something real." "And what about the man who lives here? How do you feel about him?" Daisy guided her horse closer to Zachary's until their legs were nearly touching. "I love him too," she said, her voice steady and sure. "More than I thought possible, more than I knew I could." Zachary's face transformed with joy. He dismounted and pulled Daisy down from her horse, holding her close. "Say it again." "I love you, Zachary Anderson. I love you too, Daisy Greene, so damn much it scares me sometimes." He kissed her, deep and passionate, right there in the snowy meadow with the mountains rising around them and the sky impossibly blue overhead. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Zachary kept his hands on her waist. "I know I said I'd wait until spring to ask." Said I'd give you time to be sure. But Daisy, I'm sure. I've been sure since that first night when you sat at my table and told me about walking through a storm to save a goat. I want you in my life, in my home, in my bed. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to build this ranch with you, build a family with you. Will you marry me? Daisy's heart felt like it might burst from her chest. This man, this wonderful, steady, loving man wanted her. Not for what she could do or provide, but simply for who she was. The tears that fell were tears of joy, of relief, of coming home after being lost for so long. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Zachary whooped and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around like he had that day in the kitchen. When he set her down, he kissed her again, tender this time, reverent. I'll be good to you, he promised. I'll work hard and keep you safe and love you every day of my life. I know you will. And I'll do the same for you. They rode back to the ranch in a state of giddy happiness, making plans and dreaming out loud. They'd marry in the spring, Zachary said, once the preacher made his circuit through Willow Creek. It wasn't a fancy church wedding, but Daisy didn't care. All she cared about was becoming Zachary's wife, binding their lives together officially and permanently. That night, they sat at the table and Zachary pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a simple gold band, worn smooth with age. It was my mother's, he said. Only thing I have left of her besides memories. I'd be honored if you'd wear it. Daisy took the ring with trembling fingers. It was beautiful in its simplicity, a perfect circle of gold that caught the firelight. Zachary slipped it onto her finger and it fit as though made for her. It's perfect, she whispered. She would have liked you, I think. My mother. She always said the measure of a man was in his actions, not his words. You've shown me through everything you do that you're a good man, Zachary. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to that faith. They sealed their engagement with kisses that grew more heated, more urgent. When Zachary finally pulled back, his breathing ragged, there was desire clear in his eyes but also restraint. We should wait, he said roughly, until we're married. Do this right. Daisy appreciated the sentiment, but part of her wanted to throw caution aside, to claim this man as hers in every way possible. But she also understood his desire to honor her, to treat her with respect. All right, she agreed. We'll wait, but it won't be easy. No, Zachary said with a rueful smile. It definitely won't be easy. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Daisy sewed her wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown of pale blue wool, practical enough for the still cool spring weather. Zachary worked on expanding the house, adding a second bedroom that would eventually be for children. He said with a shy smile that made Daisy's heart melt. Word spread through the small community about the upcoming wedding. Martha from the general store made the trip out to the ranch with several other women from the area, bringing supplies and advice. They helped Daisy prepare, teaching her the specific challenges of keeping house in the territory, sharing recipes and techniques for preserving food and managing livestock. You've landed yourself a good one, a woman named Sarah told Daisy as they worked on finishing the wedding dress together. Zach's been alone too long. Needs someone to share that life with. I'm the lucky one, Daisy said, and meant it with all her heart. The wedding took place on a bright April morning at the small church in Willow Creek. Spring had come at last, the snow melting away to reveal the brown earth beneath, just starting to show hints of green. The creek that ran through Zachary's property was running high and fast with snowmelt, and the first wildflowers were beginning to bloom in sheltered spots. Daisy wore her blue dress with wildflowers in her hair, simple and beautiful. Zachary stood at the front of the church in his best suit, his eyes never leaving her as she walked down the aisle. The church was small but packed with neighbors and friends who'd come to witness the union. The preacher, an elderly man named Reverend Thomas, led them through the vows. When it came time for Zachary to speak, his voice was strong and clear. I, Zachary Anderson, take you, Daisy Greene, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as we both shall live. Daisy repeated her own vows, her voice thick with emotion. I, Daisy Greene, take you, Zachary Anderson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you through whatever life brings, for as long as we both shall live. By the power vested in me by the territory of Washington, Reverend Thomas intoned, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Zachary needed no further encouragement. He pulled Daisy into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and laughter of the assembled crowd. When they finally broke apart, both grinning like fools, they were married. Husband and wife, partners in life and love. The celebration afterward at the church hall was simple but joyful. There was food and music, dancing and laughter. Zachary danced with his new wife, holding her close, and Daisy felt like she was floating. This was happiness, real and true, and hers to keep. As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon for the ride home. Home. It was truly home now, Daisy thought as the ranch came into view in the gathering dusk. Not just Zachary's place where she was staying, but their home together. Zachary carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room. The fire was burning low in the hearth, and Clover, now grown into a sleek young goat, bleated a greeting from her spot by the fire. Welcome home, Mrs. Anderson, Zachary said softly, his hands on her waist. I like the sound of that, Mrs. Anderson. Daisy reached up and cupped his face, feeling the slight roughness of stubble under her palms. I love you so much, I love you too, more than words can say. He kissed her gently, then with increasing passion. Daisy, I want to make this marriage real in every way. I want to love you the way a husband should love his wife. Then love me, she whispered. I'm yours, Zachary, completely and forever yours. He swept her into his arms and carried her to their bedroom, the room they'd prepared together over the past months. And there, in the gentle darkness with the mountains standing sentinel outside, they came together as husband and wife, sealing their vows with tenderness and passion, and love that felt like it could move mountains. Afterward, lying tangled together in the quilts, Zachary traced patterns on Daisy's bare shoulder. Thank you, he said softly. For what? For showing up that day. For carrying that goat through a blizzard and stumbling into my life. For giving us a chance, for loving me. Daisy turned in his arms to face him, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. Thank you for taking me in. For seeing me, really seeing me when I felt invisible to the world, for loving me not for what I can do but for who I am. You saved my life, Zachary, in more ways than you know. We saved each other, I think. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. And we're going to build a beautiful life together, I promise you that. I know we will. They fell asleep in each other's arms, two people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd recognized in each other the missing piece they'd both been searching for. The first year of their marriage was both harder and more rewarding than Daisy had imagined. The work of the ranch was constant and demanding. There were early mornings and late nights, times when the weather was harsh or the animals were sick, or the 100 small crises that came with managing a working ranch threatened to overwhelm them. But through it all, they had each other. When Daisy was exhausted from hours of preserving vegetables from the large garden she'd planted, Zachary was there to massage her aching shoulders and make her laugh with silly jokes. When a late spring blizzard killed several calves and Zachary was discouraged, Daisy held him and reminded him of all they'd built, all they'd accomplished together. They worked as a team, making decisions together, supporting each other through challenges. Zachary taught Daisy to rope and ride like a true ranch hand, and she proved to have a natural talent for it. Daisy taught Zachary simple pleasures he'd forgotten in his years alone, like taking time to watch the sunset or reading aloud to each other in the evenings. Clover became something of a ranch mascot, friendly and curious, always underfoot. When she had her own kids the following spring, Zachary helped Daisy bottle feed the one that was too weak to compete with its sibling, and they raised it together into a strong, healthy goat. Their nearest neighbors, a family called the Harpers who lived about 10 miles east, became good friends. Ben Harper was a few years older than Zachary, with a wife named Elizabeth and 3 young children. They helped each other during busy seasons, and the friendship between the two families grew strong. "You two are good together," Elizabeth told Daisy one day as they worked on preserving fruit from Elizabeth's small orchard. "I can see it in the way you look at each other, the way you move around each other like you're dancing. That's rare, you know, real partnership in a marriage. I know how lucky I am," Daisy said, thinking of Zachary out working with Ben, their laughter carrying on the summer breeze. "Some days I still can't believe this is my life, that I found this place. Luck had nothing to do with it. You walked through a blizzard with a baby goat tucked in your coat. That takes courage and determination. You made your own luck, Daisy." By the time their first anniversary rolled around, Daisy had some news she'd been holding close, waiting for the right moment to share. That evening, after a special dinner she'd prepared, she took Zachary's hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. What he looked at her, confusion giving way to dawning realization. "Daisy, are you saying I'm pregnant? We're going to have a baby?" The joy on Zachary's face was incandescent. He stood so quickly his chair fell over, pulling Daisy into his arms and holding her like she was made of glass. "A baby, we're going to have a baby." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Are you all right? Do you feel well? Should you be sitting down?" Daisy laughed, delighted by his concern. "I'm fine. I'm healthy and strong, and I'm going to be fine. We're going to be fine. I'm going to be a father." Zachary said it like he couldn't quite believe it. "We're going to be parents." "Yes, we are. Sometime in January, the doctor thinks." That night, Zachary was impossibly gentle with her, his hands reverent as he touched her. "I love you," he kept saying, over and over like a prayer. "I love you so much." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Daisy had some morning sickness in the early months, but nothing too severe. She continued to work alongside Zachary, though he fussed over her constantly, trying to get her to take it easier. She refused to be treated like an invalid, though she did appreciate his concern. As fall arrived and her belly began to swell visibly, they prepared the second bedroom as a nursery. Zachary built a beautiful cradle from pine, sanding it smooth and carving flowers into the headboard. Daisy sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart filled with anticipation. Elizabeth Harper and Martha from the general store came to visit regularly as Daisy's time drew near, making sure she had everything she needed, sharing their own experiences with childbirth and motherhood. Their support and friendship meant the world to Daisy, who'd had so few close female friends in her life before coming to the territory. January arrived cold and snowy, and Daisy felt huge and ungainly. But Zachary never failed to tell her she was beautiful, kissing her rounded belly and talking to the baby within. "I can't wait to meet you," he'd whisper. "Can't wait to hold you and watch you grow. You're already so loved, little one." The labor started on a bitterly cold night in the middle of January. Zachary rode through the darkness to fetch Elizabeth Harper, who had experience as a midwife, while Daisy tried to breathe through the contractions that were coming harder and faster. Elizabeth arrived with calm competence, taking charge of the situation and reassuring both Daisy and Zachary. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Zachary refused to leave Daisy's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, offering encouragement and love even when she snapped at him in pain. Finally, as the winter sun was setting on the second day, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the small house. Elizabeth cleaned him and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Daisy's arms. "You have a son," she said with a warm smile. "A beautiful, healthy son." Daisy looked down at the tiny face, scrunched and red from crying, and felt her heart expand in a way she hadn't known was possible. This was her child, hers and Zachary's. The physical proof of their love made flesh. Zachary leaned over them both, his finger gently touching their son's tiny hand. The baby's fist closed around it, and Zachary made a choked sound, tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect." "Daisy, he's absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Daisy asked, unable to take her eyes off their son. They discussed names over the months but never settled on one definitively. Now, looking at this new life they'd created, Zachary said quietly, "What about Matthew?" "It means gift of God, because that's what he is, what you both are, gifts I never expected but am grateful for every day." "Matthew Anderson," Daisy tested the name. "I love it. Matthew it is." Elizabeth stayed for a few days, helping Daisy learn to nurse the baby and recover from the birth. By the time she left, Daisy was managing well, though exhausted from the demands of a newborn. Those first weeks were a blur of feedings and diaper changes and precious little sleep. But through the exhaustion, there was such joy. Watching Zachary with their son, seeing this strong, capable man reduced to mush by a tiny baby's smile, filled Daisy with a love so profound, it brought her to tears. "You're a wonderful father," she told him one night as he paced the floor with Matthew, rocking him gently. "I'm trying." "He's so small, Daisy, so fragile. I'm terrified I'll do something wrong." "You won't. You're patient and gentle, and he already loves you. Look how he calms when you hold him." It was true. Matthew would fuss for Daisy sometimes, but the moment Zachary picked him up, the baby would quiet, soothed by his father's deep voice and steady presence. As winter gave way to spring, and Matthew grew stronger and more alert, life on the ranch found a new rhythm. Daisy managed the house and the baby while Zachary handled the heavier outside work. Though they still worked together whenever possible, Matthew bundled up in a sling against Daisy's chest or watching from a blanket spread in the shade. On Matthew's first birthday, they had a small celebration with the Harpers and a few other neighbors who'd become friends. Looking around at the faces gathered in their home, at her husband holding their son, at the life they'd built together, Daisy felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, after everyone had left and Matthew was asleep in his cradle, Daisy and Zachary sat on the porch in the cool spring darkness. Zachary's arm was around her shoulders and she leaned into his warmth. "2 years ago I walked through a blizzard carrying a baby goat," Daisy said softly. "I was lost and alone and scared, and I ended up here with you with all of this." She gestured at the ranch spread out before them in the moonlight. "Sometimes I still can't believe it's real." "It's real," Zachary assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You're real, our son is real, our life together is real, and I'm grateful for every single day of it." "So am I." Daisy turned to look at him, this man who'd taken her in when she had nothing, who'd loved her when she felt unlovable, who'd built this beautiful life with her. I love you, Zachary Anderson. Thank you for giving me a home. Thank you for making it one. This house was just walls and a roof before you. You brought life and love and laughter. You brought yourself, and that's the greatest gift I've ever received." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the soft sounds of their son sleeping inside. The future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. There would be challenges, Daisy knew. Hard winters and difficult years. Times when the ranch struggled or illness struck or any of the 100 things that could go wrong in this harsh but beautiful land. But they would face it together. That was the promise they'd made to each other, the vow they renewed every day in looks and touches and quiet acts of love. Together they were strong enough for anything. Over the next several years, their family grew. A daughter named Grace arrived 2 years after Matthew, with Zachary's gray-blue eyes and Daisy's dark curls. Another son, Samuel, followed 2 years after that. The house rang with the sounds of children playing, and Zachary added more rooms to accommodate their growing family. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Zachary's cattle operation expanded, and Daisy's vegetable gardens became productive enough that they sold the surplus at markets in both Willow Creek and Tacoma. They saved their money carefully, always planning for the future, making improvements to the ranch bit by bit. Matthew grew into a serious boy who loved the animals and followed his father everywhere, learning the business of ranching from the time he could walk. Grace was spirited and curious, always getting into mischief, but with such charm that it was hard to stay angry with her. Samuel was the baby, sweet-tempered and affectionate, equally happy playing with his siblings or curled up with Clover, who'd become impossibly old for a goat, but still ruled the barn with gentle authority. Daisy sometimes thought about that day in the blizzard, about the desperate woman she'd been, carrying a baby goat and nothing else. That woman felt like someone from another life now. She'd been so lost then, so broken by betrayal and circumstance. She'd thought she had nothing left to give, nothing left to hope for, but she'd been wrong. She'd had more strength than she knew, more courage than she'd given herself credit for. That strength had carried her through the storm to Zachary's door. And Zachary, with his simple words about room in the barn, had given her not just shelter from the storm but a place to belong. They celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary on a warm spring day. The children were staying with the Harpers for the night, giving Zachary and Daisy a rare evening alone. They took advantage of it, riding out to their favorite spot overlooking the valley, bringing a picnic dinner to eat as they watched the sunset. 10 years, Zachary mused, his arm around Daisy as they sat on a blanket. Seems impossible it's been that long. Seems like just yesterday you were stumbling out of that blizzard. Best thing I ever did, getting lost in that storm. Daisy smiled up at him. It brought me to you. I used to wonder sometimes, those years before you came, if I'd made a mistake. Building this ranch so far from anywhere, living alone. If maybe I was being foolish, thinking I could make a life out here by myself. He pulled her closer. Then you showed up, half frozen and stubborn as hell, and I knew. This was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing, just waiting for the right person to share it with. I love you, Daisy said, the words as true and powerful as the day she'd first spoken them. I love the life we've built. I love our children and our home and the work we do together. I love everything about this life, Zachary. Every single thing. Even the hard parts. The winters and the work and the isolation sometimes, especially those parts, because they're real. This life is real in a way nothing in my old life ever was. It matters. We matter. She turned to face him fully. Do you ever regret it? Taking in a stranger, letting me stay, building all this with me. Never. Not for a single second. Zachary cupped her face in his hands, his eyes intense. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Daisy Anderson. You and our children, this life we've made. I wouldn't change a single moment of it." They made love there on the blanket as the stars came out, as familiar with each other after 10 years as they were that first night, but with layers of trust and intimacy built up over time. It was sweet and passionate and perfect, a renewal of vows that needed no words. Afterward, lying in Zachary's arms under the vast sky, Daisy thought about the future. About watching their children grow, about grandchildren someday, about growing old together in this place they'd built. It was a beautiful vision, made all the more beautiful because she knew it would come true. They would build it together, day by day, year by year, with the same love and determination that had brought them this far. The children grew and the ranch continued to prosper. Matthew showed real aptitude for the cattle business, and by the time he was 15, Zachary was trusting him with real responsibilities, treating him like a junior partner. Grace discovered a talent for training horses and spent hours working with the young stock, gentling them with patience and skill that amazed even Zachary. Samuel was the scholar of the family, always reading, always asking questions, and they talked about sending him to school in Seattle when he was old enough. Though the thought of having him gone made Daisy's heart ache, more families moved into the territory over the years. Willow Creek grew from a handful of buildings to a proper town with a school, a hotel, and even a small newspaper. The area was civilizing, becoming less wild and dangerous, though it retained the sense of frontier possibility that had drawn Zachary there in the first place. Through it all, Daisy and Zachary remained partners in every sense of the word. They made decisions together, supported each other through crises, celebrated victories together. When Matthew was 17 and wanted to court the daughter of a neighboring rancher, they discussed how to handle it together. When Grace broke her arm falling from a horse and Daisy was frantic with worry, Zachary held her until she could breathe again. When a bad winter killed a quarter of their herd and they faced financial difficulties, they worked through it as a team, cutting expenses and finding creative solutions until they were back on solid ground. Their love deepened and matured over the years, growing from the passionate spark of those early days into something richer and more complex. They knew each other's quirks and habits, could communicate with a look or a touch, finished each other's sentences. They still made time for romance, stealing moments alone when they could, still held hands like newlyweds, still found joy in each other's presence. Clover eventually passed away at the remarkable age of 15. Ancient for a goat. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch, and the whole family cried. She'd been there from the beginning, a link to that first desperate day when Daisy had stumbled through a blizzard carrying something small and helpless and hoping for mercy. "She was a good goat," Zachary said at the small funeral, his arm around Daisy. "Brought us luck and love." "She brought me to you," Daisy corrected softly. "Or I brought her. Either way, I'm grateful." Matthew married at 21 and brought his bride, a sweet girl named Anna, to live and work on the ranch. Zachary built them a small house on the property, close enough to help with the work but far enough to give them privacy. It was strange and wonderful to have another generation starting their adult lives here, to see the ranch becoming a true family enterprise. Grace, independent and adventurous, surprised them all by becoming a successful horse trader, traveling throughout the territory buying and selling stock. She married at 23 to a man who worked for the railroad, and they settled in Tacoma, though she visited often and still considered the ranch home. Samuel did go to Seattle for schooling, and he thrived there, eventually becoming a teacher himself. He wrote home regularly, full of enthusiasm for his work and the city, but he always came back for holidays and summers, reconnecting with the land and the family that had shaped him. Daisy and Zachary's hair began to gray, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work. But their love never wavered, never faded. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by time and tested by life into something unbreakable. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Matthew and Anna had 3 children now, ranging from 8 to 3. Grace and her husband had 2. Samuel was still unmarried but spoke fondly of a fellow teacher in Seattle who might, he hinted with a smile, become more than a friend someday. Looking around at the faces assembled in the house that had once been so empty and silent, Daisy felt tears of joy prick her eyes. This was her family, not just by blood but by choice and love and years of building together. Every person in this room was here because she'd walked through a blizzard 31 years ago, because Zachary had taken her in, because they'd chosen to build a life together. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, his arm around her waist as they watched their grandchildren play. "That I'm the luckiest woman alive, that every hard thing I went through before I met you was worth it because it led me here." She leaned into him, solid and warm and still hers after all these years. "That I'd do it all again in a heartbeat if it meant ending up here with you." "I love you, Daisy Anderson, just as much today as the day I married you, more actually because now I know all the reasons why. I love you too, always have, always will." That night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Daisy and Zachary sat on their porch as they had so many nights over the years. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, the sounds of animals settling for the night mixing with the wind through the pines. No regrets. Zachary asked, a question he'd asked before but never tired of hearing the answer to. Not a single one. "You. Only that I didn't find you sooner, that we didn't have even more years together." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her silver-streaked hair. "But I'll take what we have and be grateful for every moment." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The future stretched ahead, shorter now than the past they'd shared, but still full of possibility. There would be more grandchildren, more seasons, more sunsets watched from this porch. There would be hard times still to come, they both knew that, but they would face them together as they always had. In the distance, a coyote howled and was answered by another. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and earth and home. Inside the house, one of the grandchildren laughed in their sleep. These were the sounds of their life, the music of the world they'd built. "Thank you," Daisy said quietly, "for taking me in that day, for loving me, for giving me this life. Thank you for stumbling into mine, for carrying that goat through a blizzard and ending up at my door, for staying and building this with me." Zachary's voice was rough with emotion. "You made me happier than I ever thought possible, Daisy. You made me whole." She turned in his arms and kissed him, a kiss that held 30 years of love and devotion, of partnership and passion, of choosing each other every single day. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, eyes bright with tears and joy. The years continued to pass, gentler now but no less precious. They celebrated grandchildren's birthdays and first days of school, attended Matthew's daughter's wedding, welcomed Samuel home with his new wife, a lovely woman who taught music. The ranch remained productive under Matthew's management, though Zachary still helped where he could, unwilling to fully relinquish the work he'd poured his life into. Daisy's garden remained her pride and joy, though she had help now from Anna and visiting grandchildren. She taught them the same lessons the land had taught her about patience and care, about nurturing things and watching them grow. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the day she'd stumbled into his life, about the love story that had given them all their existence. When Daisy and Zachary reached their 40th anniversary, they were in their 70s, still healthy but showing their age. The celebration was smaller this time, just family, but no less meaningful. They renewed their vows in the same church where they'd married, speaking the same words with tears streaming down their faces, meaning them just as deeply as they had 4 decades before. "I can't imagine my life without you in it," Zachary said that night as they prepared for bed in the room they'd shared for so many years. "Can't remember what it was like before you. Don't want to remember." "I know, my love. I feel the same." Daisy helped him with his shirt, her fingers still knowing every inch of him despite the changes time had wrought. "We've had a beautiful life together, haven't we? The best. Absolutely the best." They lay in bed together, holding hands like they had every night for 40 years, and talked about the past and the future. About their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and the land, about the life they'd built from nothing but love and determination. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Daisy asked. "When I showed up half frozen with Clover tucked in my coat. I said there's room in the barn." Zachary smiled at the memory. "Didn't know then that I was really making room in my life, in my heart. Best decision I ever made." "Mine too. Choosing to stay, choosing you, choosing this life, all of it. The best decisions I ever made." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, content and complete. Outside, the ranch slept under a blanket of stars, the legacy they'd built stretching out in every direction. Their children carried their values and their love forward into the world. Their grandchildren played on the land they'd tended for so many years. The house they'd filled with laughter and love stood solid and warm, a testament to what could be built when two people committed fully to each other and to a shared dream. The story that had begun with a desperate woman and a baby goat stumbling through a blizzard had become a love story for the ages, not because it was easy or perfect, but because it was real. Because Daisy and Zachary had chosen each other every single day, through good times and bad, through abundance and scarcity, through youth and age. They'd built something lasting and beautiful, something that would endure long after they were gone in the lives of their descendants and the land they'd so carefully tended. More years passed, and eventually, Zachary's health began to decline. He'd lived a hard life, done hard work, and his body finally began to protest the decades of labor. But even in his diminishing strength, his love for Daisy never wavered. She cared for him as he'd once cared for her, with patience and tenderness and unwavering devotion. "I'm not ready to leave you," he told her one afternoon as they sat on the porch together, his hand clasped in hers. "Then don't. Stay with me as long as you can." Daisy's voice was steady, though her heart was breaking at the thought of losing him. "And when you can't stay anymore, I'll be all right. You've made sure of that. You've given me a family, a home, a life full of love. I'll carry that with me always. Promise me you'll keep going. Keep living, keep finding joy. Don't just wait around to follow me. I promise." "But Zachary, you're not leaving yet. We still have time." And they did have time, precious months where they simply existed together, holding hands and watching sunsets, surrounded by family, grateful for every moment. Zachary lived to see another spring, to watch the land wake up one more time, to hold his newest great-grandchild, Matthew's grandson, a baby boy they named Zachary in his honor. When Zachary finally passed, peacefully in his sleep with Daisy beside him, he was 82 years old. They'd had 57 years together, a lifetime of love and partnership. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the territory, a testament to the respect and affection Zachary had earned over his long life. Daisy grieved deeply, but not bitterly. How could she be bitter when she'd been given such a gift? She'd had a love that most people only dreamed of, a partnership that had enriched every aspect of her life. She'd been cherished and valued and loved completely for more than half a century. She continued to live at the ranch, supported by her children and grandchildren, still tending her garden though on a smaller scale, still watching the land change with the seasons. She told stories to anyone who would listen about Zachary, about their love, about the life they'd built. She wanted to make sure he was remembered, that their story was passed down. On the anniversary of that blizzard day when she'd stumbled into Zachary's life, Daisy would make the walk out to the meadow where he'd proposed, where they'd renewed their vows so many times over the years. She'd sit there and talk to him, telling him about the family, about the ranch, about her life without him. "I miss you," she'd say to the wind and the mountains. "Every single day I miss you, but I'm keeping my promise. I'm still living, still finding joy, because that's what you'd want. That's what we built together, a life worth living fully." Daisy lived to be 88 years old, active and sharp until nearly the end. She died on a warm summer day, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, holding a photograph of Zachary and smiling. At her funeral, the preacher spoke of a love story that had spanned nearly 6 decades, of two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful together. He spoke of Daisy's courage and strength, of Zachary's kindness and steadfastness, of a partnership that had become legendary in the community. Matthew, now an old man himself, stood to speak about his parents. "My mother used to tell us the story of how she met my father," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the packed church. "How she walked through a blizzard carrying a baby goat, how my father took her in and gave her shelter. How he said there's room in the barn, but what he really meant was there's room in my life, in my heart for you." They built something extraordinary together, not just this ranch, though that's impressive enough, but a love that inspired everyone who witnessed it. A partnership that showed us all what marriage could be when two people fully committed to each other. They gave us a legacy of love and hard work and family that will continue for generations. My mother lived for 6 years without my father, and they were good years. She found joy and purpose and continued to contribute to the family and community she'd helped build. But I know part of her was always waiting, always ready to join him again. And now she has. They're together again, and I imagine my father greeting her the way he always did, with that smile that was only for her, telling her welcome home. They buried Daisy next to Zachary on the hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that bore both their names and the inscription, "Together always." The ranch continued under Matthew's care, then passed to his children, a lasting legacy of two people who'd found each other in a blizzard and built an empire of love. The story became part of local legend, the tale of the woman who showed up carrying a baby goat and the cowboy who said there's room in the barn. It was told and retold over the years, a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that sometimes the worst storms led to the brightest dawns, that courage and kindness and choosing to take a chance on someone could change everything. The house still stood 100 years later, preserved by descendants who understood its significance. Tourists came sometimes to see the place where the famous love story had unfolded, to walk the land that Daisy and Zachary had tended, to stand in the barn where it had all begun with a simple offer of shelter. But more than the physical legacy, Daisy and Zachary left behind a legacy of love that rippled through generations. Their descendants carried their values forward, teaching their own children about commitment and partnership, about choosing love every day, about building something lasting together. The story of their love became a touchstone, a reminder of what was possible when two people truly saw each other and chose to build a life together. In the end, that was the real miracle. Not that Daisy had survived the blizzard, though that was remarkable. Not that Zachary had taken her in, though that was kind. The real miracle was what they'd built from that chance encounter, the way they'd transformed a moment of desperate need and simple generosity into a love story that would inspire people for generations to come. They'd proven that love wasn't just about grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but about showing up for each other every day, about choosing partnership over pride, about building something together that was greater than what either could have created alone. They'd shown that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the smallest acts of kindness, with seeing someone in need and simply saying, "There's room. There's room in the barn. There's room in my life. There's room in my heart." And from that simple beginning, from that moment of connection in the midst of a storm, they'd built something eternal,